So, I used to dread conflict. I'd do anything to avoid it. I'd run around behind the scenes trying to fend it off at the pass. I'd get sick to my stomach when I felt repetitive conflict coming up. And I was so sick of my own inability to deal with it. I wanted to get rid of conflict. So I was, at the time, and still am, a performing artist. And I'd been working in theater for 40 years. And I decided to go get a master's degree in conflict studies so that I could get rid of conflict. And so I started working in conflict alongside my other work in theater. And what I found is that not only is it impossible to get rid of conflict, but conflict is this extraordinary place of possibility. And all of us are already practicing conflict every day, whether we like it or not. So the question is not, how do we get rid of conflict? The question is, what do we want to be practicing? Which approach do we want to be practicing? Because conflict will come up in every area of our lives, and it will continue to do so. And it can go either way. It can be exhausting and stressful. It can end in broken relationships and lost opportunities. Or, if we recognize the possibility in conflict, it can deepen our connection to the people we care about. It can provoke useful conversation with the people with whom we disagree. Conflict can give us the momentum and the opportunity to talk about what matters. So conflict's inevitable, but destructive conflict is not inevitable. What happens in a conflict depends on what the people in the conflict decide to do, which actions they choose. And the actions that all of us choose in a conflict are entirely up to us. No one is controlling us. In every moment of conflict, no matter how big or small it is, we have a choice. We can make things worse, or we can choose actions that open up new possibilities. So we probably all have a pretty good sense of what destructive conflict feels like. Let me just dramatize a few of them so we kind of remind ourselves how it goes. Let's say that you're in a conflict with your partner, and you feel like you've just been there 1,000 times before, and you're done. You can't respond well anymore, and you find yourself saying something like, I'm not talking to you about this, okay? You're just gonna overreact like you always do. And your partner says, I'm not overreacting, okay? You're impossible to talk to when you get like this and you say, I'm impossible? No, this is not my fault. Okay, if you could just talk about things like a normal person, so on and on it goes. Or maybe the conflict's out in the community, so between teachers and a school, for example. And a parent finds himself getting caught up in it and finds himself saying to the teacher, if you cared about the kids at the school, you wouldn't be going on strike. And the teacher comes right back, well, if you cared about the kids at the school, you'd be supporting the strike. And so on and on it goes. Attack and counterattack. And what matters remains unaddressed. So we probably all have some experience of some version of this kind of destructive conflict, because the mechanism and the outcomes of the attack, counterattack methodology are the same whether we're standing in the kitchen, on the street, in the school, at work, in the United States Congress, in the United Nations. So what if we want something different? What if we want to practice productive conflict? What can we do? We can't change what other people do in a conflict, try as we might. We often can't change the situation. It's where we live, it's where we work, it's our family. But we can change what we do. And we can do it in every instance, because our approach to conflict is not part of our character. It's not part of our personality, even though it might feel like it sometimes. Our approach to conflict is something that we learned. And so we can learn something else. It's a matter of practice, because our minds, like our bodies, are plastic, and so every action we take makes it easier to repeat that action. What we practice is what we do. And what we've practiced the most is what we are going to default to when the going gets tough. So what are we practicing? in conflict? What do we want to practice? Here's 2 ideas. Idea number 1, don't hear attack. Idea number 2, develop curiosity in difficult situations. So these 2 ideas are connected. We need curiosity to be able to not hear attack. Let's look at the question of attack first and come back to curiosity in a moment. So idea number 1, don't hear attack. So what does this mean and why is it a good idea? What it means is practice listening for what people are really trying to say, even if they're saying it very badly. So don't hear attack is a call to change our own mental stance toward the person with whom we're in conflict, to change what we're paying attention to listen past the attack, to hear the information. So this is not encouragement to ignore real threat or turn the other cheek. What practicing not hearing attack means is getting used to asking ourselves questions like, okay, if I wasn't hearing attack right now, what would I be hearing? What is the information here? Or when we find ourselves wanting to go on the attack, to stop and ask ourselves, if I said this without attack, what would it sound like? So getting used to asking ourselves, what is the information behind the attack? So obviously this is not always so easy because attack is very seductive. It's easy to hear. It can be tempting to use ourselves. Sometimes in conflict we are actually being attacked. And sometimes we just feel like we're being attacked. But the point is the same in either case. Even though attack is often what we notice the most in a conflict, it's not the most important thing. The most important thing in a conflict is what people need. Attack is just a strategy to try to meet a need. And a solution that works in a conflict is one that meets the needs on both sides. One that addresses the needs, not the positions, not the opinions, not the attack strategies. So, what do we choose to do in conflict? How do we move forward? How do we move forward when we can't see past the attack? If we want to find out what the needs are inside the conflict, we have to be able to practice listening past attack in times when we're not under stress. We need to start small. So in every day, we have the chance to start over, practice listening to what people are saying, to figure out what's going on. So to find out what the needs are in a conflict, we have to be able to listen past attack, no matter how wounding or enraging it is. And this is something that we can practice, because we're not doomed to repeat destructive patterns. We're not doomed to obey our own destructive habits. We have a choice. In every moment, we have a choice. And to do so, we need curiosity, which takes us to the second point. Develop curiosity in difficult situations. So curiosity is a human characteristic, but the ability to remain curious in difficult situations is a skill, and it takes practice. It's the ability in the presence of fear and anger and sorrow to continue to ask ourselves, okay, what is going on here? What have I not yet noticed? So inside of attack, we require the curiosity to be able to move forward. And this sounds something like this. Let's say that you are in a conflict with your colleagues at work and they say, see? This is why I don't even bring things up anymore, because you're incapable of accepting feedback. Now, if we listen past the attack, if we wake up our curiosity, we might hear them saying something like, I have some feedback for you. What would be the best way for me to offer it to you? Or in a conflict between separating partners, and one of them says, I do not want that woman in the house when you have the kids. If we were able to listen past that attack, We might hear that person saying, I'm worried about how any new relationships we have might affect the kids. So the point here is not to become a saint or ignore our own needs. The point is, if we have a habit of primarily listening for attack and responding to attack, then we're wasting our time on a secondary issue. But if we build a practice of listening for information and responding to information, then we fundamentally change the conversation and conflict. Not hearing attack is a mindset and a practice. And you have the ability and the capacity and the possibility to not hear attack no matter what the other people do in a conflict, no matter how bad it gets. Not hearing attack helps us hear and talk about what matters, so destructive conflict goes down and constructive connection comes up. So developing curiosity in difficult situations. Robust, persistent curiosity is transformative. It helps us imagine that something else is possible, even when we feel stuck and hopeless, because something else is almost always possible. But in the stress of conflict, we often abandon curiosity, and when we do so, we stop trying to understand the other person. We become more willing to see them get hurt. We stop being able to see ourselves as being in relationship to them, and to varying degrees, we begin to dehumanize them. We step away. So developing curiosity in difficult situation means moving in. Developing a mental stance of curiosity toward people and situations that we are not curious about, that we dislike, that we fear or disagree with. So often, of course, the last thing we feel like doing when we're angry with someone is moving toward them with the intent to understand. It can be much more tempting to start attacking their personality or their ideas, or to start defending our own personality or ideas. And when this happens, we tend to end up in curiosity-free exchanges that sound something like this. One person says, I don't want gay people anywhere near my kids, okay? They shouldn't teach, they should not be in the clergy, and God knows they shouldn't be leading youth groups. And then the person replies, well, I don't want homophobic idiots like you spouting stupidity on the street, but apparently I can't control that. So these kind of exchanges are common, and they're seductive in an odd way. But we are not doomed to repeat destructive patterns, no matter how seductive they are. We can develop the ability to remain curious in difficult situations. We can acknowledge what a person has said and try to figure out how it makes sense to them, because it does make sense to them somehow. And doing so would sound something more like this. Okay, so it sounds like you're uncomfortable having your kids around gay people, is that right? What are your specific concerns? Which experiences have you had that have led you to believe what you do? So whatever the scale or the severity of the conflict, when you notice yourself losing curiosity and falling into polarization, stop and recognize that this is a choice, and we can choose something else. Developing curiosity in difficult situations is a call for us to develop the strength of our minds, to be capable and willing of being present with people and situations that we dislike, fear, and disagree with, and still be able to listen for what we have not yet heard. So instead of saying to our work colleague, you are just such a control freak, it's impossible to work with you, we can say, look, I'd like to have more input on this project. How can we make that work? Or instead of saying to our partners, would you just calm down? Oh my God, you're acting like a maniac. We can say, well, looks like you're furious about this. What's the most important thing to you here? Or if we're negotiating between groups, instead of saying, look, this is pointless. You can't even trust them. I don't know what we're even doing here. We can say, okay, if we are going to make an agreement here, I want to make sure it makes sense to both parties so that it will hold. And I'd like to build assurances into the agreement itself. So conflict is this amazing place of possibility. and we are the actors in it. Conflict can clarify what's important to us and to the people with whom we're connected. It can push us to recognize the humanity in people when they're at their worst. And it gives us the momentum to carry out change. So acting consciously and effectively in conflict is a matter of curiosity, mindset, and practice. In every moment of conflict, we have a choice. And we always have an effect on the situation. We can choose the pathway of attack and counterattack, or we can call up our curiosity. We can listen past attack for what matters, and we can find out what's possible. The choice is entirely up to us. Thank you very much.